The Fox Queen says I'm her mate. Now apparently royal proposals involve butt slaps them. Human envoy stood calmly at the center of the grand Volpurn Hall. Even though every instinct told him he should not be standing there alone, the chamber was vast and high. Shaped like a curved shell of silver stone and glowing amber light, tall banners hung from the ceiling, each marked with symbols that looked like flowing flames and sharp claws. Along both sides of the hall sat rows of Volpurn nobles, fox-like beings with tall ears, long tails, and eyes that gleamed like polished gold. Their robes were layered, elegant, heavy with meaning. The human did not know any of that. To him, it was just another alien court, another ceremony, another long day of diplomacy. He had learned long ago that the galaxy was full of strange customs, and the best way to survive them was to remain calm, polite, and observant. His name was Elias Ward, and he was not special by human standards. He was not a soldier, not a noble, not a hero. He was chosen because he listened more than he spoke, and because he did not panic easily. Humanity believed that was enough. At the far end of the hall, seated upon a raised crystalline throne, was the Fox Queen. Queen Shireen of the Volpurn Stellar Dominion watched the human closely. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes never left him. Her long tail rested beside the throne, slowly swaying in a thoughtful rhythm. She had ruled for over 3 decades, and in that time she had seen hundreds of envoys from dozens of species. None had stood the way. This one did. Elias did not bow too deeply. He did not puff his chest. He did not try to look impressive. He stood straight, hands loosely at his sides, eyes respectful but not fearful. When others stared at him, he did not flinch. That, more than anything else, made the Volpurn court uneasy. The ceremony began with low music, played by instruments Elias had never seen before. The sound was soft and vibrating, almost like a heartbeat. A high-ranking Volpurn official stepped forward and spoke in the flowing, sharp language of the Dominion. A translator implanted in Elias's ear converted the sounds into simple words. By ancient accord, the voice said, "We welcome the representative of Terra." Elias nodded once. He had been briefed on the Volpurns. They valued ritual. They valued tradition. They valued restraint. He was told to follow instructions, answer questions honestly, and avoid sudden movements. Nothing more. No one had mentioned anything else. As the words of welcome continued, Elias noticed something strange. The nobles were whispering. Their ears twitched. Their tails flicked in short, nervous motions. More than a few glanced between him and the queen, their expressions tight with confusion. Elias assumed this was normal. Alien cultures often reacted strangely to humans. Deathworlders, some called them. Endurance predators. Survivors of extreme gravity and unstable ecosystems. He had heard all the labels before. He remained silent and still. Finally, the speaker stepped aside. The music faded. The queen rose from her throne. Every Volpurn in the hall stood instantly and bowed low. The sound of hundreds of tails brushing the floor echoed like a soft storm. Elias followed the example and bowed, careful not to overdo it. Queen Shireen descended the steps slowly. Each movement was graceful, controlled. Her presence filled the hall without effort. When she reached the floor, she stopped a short distance in front of the human, up close. Elias could see fine details, faint markings in her fur, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the calm strength in her posture. He felt no fear, but he did feel the weight of attention pressing in from every direction. The queen circled him once. This was not part of the briefing. Elias stayed still. She stopped. Behind him, the silence stretched. The entire court held its breath. Elias opened his mouth slightly, ready to ask if he should turn, but before he could speak, something happened. A sharp, sudden impact struck him from behind. It was not painful. It was not violent. It was surprising. Elias stumbled forward half a step, more out of shock than force. His training kicked in immediately. He straightened, breathing evenly, and resisted the strong human urge to turn around and demand an explanation. The hall exploded into noise, gasps, shouts, tales. slammed against the floor. Several nobles stood up in disbelief. Others looked as if they had just witnessed the end of the world. Elias slowly turned his head, confused. The Fox Queen stood behind him, her hand lowered, her expression unreadable. "What?" Elias said carefully. "Was that?" The translator repeated his words. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the Queen smiled. It was not a cruel smile. It was not mocking. It was thoughtful, satisfied. "The bond is sealed," Queen Shireen said calmly. The translator hesitated, recalibrated, and then repeated the sentence. Elias froze. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. Keeping his voice polite, "There may be an error. I believe this was meant to be a greeting?" The Queen tilted her head slightly. Her ears twitched. "No," she replied. "It was a proposal." The court erupted again, louder than before. Several nobles began arguing at once. Elders shouted ancient words. A few guards instinctively reached for weapons before remembering where they were and who stood before them. Elias felt his heart rate rise, but his face remained calm. "A proposal?" he repeated slowly. "Yes," the Queen said. An acceptance gesture was returned. "I did not return any gesture," Elias said. "You did," she replied. "You did not react." That answer did not help. Elias took a breath. "Your Majesty, with respect, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Human customs are irrelevant," the Queen said gently. "This is Volperin law." She turned to the court. "Record the right. Activate the accord of matched authority." Several officials turned pale. One dropped a data slate. Elias felt the situation slipping rapidly out of his control. "I am here as a diplomat," he said firmly. "I am not authorized for whatever this is." The Queen looked back at him, her gaze sharp, but not unkind. "Authority was not granted," she said. "It was recognized." It made even less sense. Around them, alarms began to hum softly as ancient systems awakened. Legal protocols that had not been triggered in centuries came online. Across the Dominion, hidden archives unlocked themselves. Elias stood in the center of it all, wondering how a single moment had gone so wrong. He had survived asteroid negotiations, pirate standoffs, and hostile councils. None of those had prepared him for this. He looked at the Queen and chose honesty. "I don't understand," he said. She studied him for a long moment. That she replied is why it worked. And far beyond the Volperin capital, across the watching networks of the galaxy, automated alerts began to spread quietly, urgently. And with growing fear, a human had just been recognized by an ancient royal system, and the stars were about to react. The hall did not calm down after the Queen's words. If anything, it grew louder. Volperin nobles argued openly now, their voices sharp and fast. Elders slammed their staffs against the floor to demand order. Guards stood stiff, unsure whether they were protecting their queen, the human, or the law itself. Elias remained in the center of it all, feeling like the quiet eye of a storm that made no sense. "Queen." Shireen raised one hand. The sound cut off instantly. Elias noticed that. One simple motion, and an entire room obeyed without question. That kind of control was not built on fear. It was built on something deeper. "The right has been triggered," the Queen said, her voice calm but carrying across the hall. "Whether you approve or not is irrelevant." One elder stepped forward, his fur pale with age and worry. "Your Majesty, the last time this law activated was before our species reached the stars. It was never meant for outsiders," the Queen finished. "For anyone," the elder said. "Especially a human." That word caused another wave of whispers. Elias did not miss it. Humans always carried weight in alien conversations, even when they tried not to. Elias cleared his throat. "The sound echoed more than he expected, Your Majesty," he said carefully. "With respect, my presence here was meant to strengthen peaceful relations. If this action causes instability, I request you request," the Queen said. Turning to face him fully, her eyes were sharp now, not hostile. But measuring, Elias stopped speaking. "You do not beg. You do not threaten. You do not demand, she continued. You speak as if you expect to be heard. I do, Elias replied before he could stop himself. The court gasped again. But this time the queen laughed softly. Yes, she said. That, she turned back to the elders. The law responded exactly as it was designed to. The human demonstrated restraint under sudden provocation. He did not flinch, strike, flee, or display submission. He remained centered. That could be training, one noble argued. Or instinct, the queen replied, which is far rarer. Ilias felt every eye return to him. His training told him to remain still, but his mind was racing. Somewhere in the legal archives of an alien empire, something old and powerful had decided he qualified for something he never wanted. Across the hall, a communication officer hurried forward and whispered urgently to one of the council members. The elder's ears flattened as he listened. The networks are already reacting, the elder announced. Other systems have received notification of a royal bond activation. That made Ilias's stomach drop. Other systems? He asked. The entire galactic registry, the elder said. This cannot be hidden. The queen nodded once, accepting that reality. Good, Elias turned toward her. Good. Yes, she said, because concealment would imply shame. There is none. Beyond the Volperan capital, the galaxy was waking up in a dozen star systems. Diplomats stared at flashing alerts they had never expected to see. Legal programs cross-checked ancient treaties. Military A's paused operations to re-evaluate threat probabilities. Political analysts reread footnotes they had ignored for centuries. One phrase appeared again and again. In forgotten legal texts, matched authority recognized and next to it. A species classification that had been quietly marked as inactive. Human. Back in the hall, Elias tried to ground himself in logic. Your Majesty, if this bond grants authority, then I must formally decline it. Humanity has no intention of ruling. You already did, the queen said. Elias frowned. When you didn't try to, she replied. The queen approached him again, stopping at a respectful distance this time. Power that seeks to prove itself is unstable. Power that does not care to be seen is safe. That's not how humans see power, Elias said. That is why the law reacted, she answered. The elders exchanged uneasy looks. One of them activated a floating display. Symbols shifted, glowing softly in the air. Elias recognized the look of a legal system older than any modern state. Your Majesty, the elder said, if this bond remains, the human gains limited royal protection. No Volperan may harm him. No treaty involving the system may exclude him. No enemy may threaten him without consequence. Another added. Ilias blinked. That's excessive, the queen said calmly, his ancient survival logic. A guard captain stepped forward. External communications are requesting clarification. Several species are concerned, I was putting it lightly, on a distant trade station. An alien merchant dropped his drink as the alert scrolled across a public display. On a War Council world, an admiral stared silently at the word human linked to royal status. On Terra itself, a group of analysts went very quiet. Humanity had always avoided thrones. They preferred councils, agreements, shared power. They believed crowns created targets. Now, one had formed around them without asking. Back in the hall, Elias took a slow breath. If this bond is real, he said, then I need to understand its limits. The queen nodded. A reasonable request. She turned to the court. Prepare the cultural archive. He will be informed. The nobles hesitated. Now, the queen repeated, they moved. Elias watched as ancient records unfolded in holographic form. Images of early Volperan history appeared times of chaos, extinction-level threats, near collapse. Again and again, a pattern emerged. When the Dominion faced annihilation, the law selected leaders not by bloodline, but by behavior under pressure. Most species tried to dominate. Some tried to submit. A few froze. The law rejected all of them. It waited for something. Else Elias swallowed. The queen watched his reaction closely. You understand now. I understand why this scares people, Elias said honestly. Yes, she agreed. Including you. That makes it dangerous, he added. She smiled slightly. Only if mishandled. Another officer rushed in, breathless. Your Majesty, the Trellick Combine has issued a formal inquiry. They are demanding to know whether this bond constitutes a military alliance. Elias rubbed his forehead. I don't even have a uniform. Maybe worse, the Queen said. More alerts came in. More demands. More fear. The Vulperin court felt smaller now, as if the weight of the galaxy pressed against its walls. Elias looked around and realized something. Unsettling, no one was treating him like an intruder anymore. They were treating him like a variable they could not control. And variables scared empires more than enemies. The Queen stepped closer and lowered her voice so only he could hear. You did not seek this, she said. That matters. I want it undone, Elias replied. That may not be possible, she said gently. He met her gaze. Then I will make sure it causes no harm. The Queen studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Outside the hall, stars continued to shine, unaware that something old had stirred. Across the galaxy, single thought spread through councils and war rooms alike. If a human could trigger ancient royal law by doing nothing, what else could they activate? And for the first time in a long while, humanity was no longer being watched as a potential threat. They were being watched as something far more unsettling. A standard. The news did not slow down. It grew heavier by the time the artificial lights of the Vulperin capital dimmed to simulate night. The galaxy had fully noticed what happened in the ceremonial hall. Signals moved faster than ships ever could. Messages crossed borders, treaties, and old grudges. Everywhere, the same question appeared in different words. What does it mean that a human was chosen? Elias Ward sat alone in a quiet chamber overlooking the city. The window showed towers shaped like curved crystal, and soft golden lights flowing through the streets below. It was beautiful, but he barely noticed. A thin band of light circled his wrist, projected by Vulperin legal systems. It was not a restraint. It was a marker. Protected status, active. He had asked for privacy, and for once the palace had agreed without argument. That alone told him how serious this had become. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes for a moment. He was tired, but his mind would not slow. Every choice now felt larger than it should. Every word carried weight he had never asked for. A soft tone sounded at the door. Enter. Queen Shireen stepped inside. She was not wearing her full royal regalia now. Her robes were simpler, lighter, more practical. For the first time since the ceremony, she looked less like a symbol and more like a person. You are awake, she said. I don't think I'll be sleeping much, Elias replied. She nodded and sat across from him, keeping a respectful distance. The councils are restless. It makes two of us, he said. She studied him quietly. You expected anger, fear, demands. You did not expect silence. Elias opened his eyes and looked at her. Silence means they are planning, yes, she agreed. And testing, as if summoned by her words. The light band on Ilias's wrist pulsed once. A symbol appeared in the air between them. Incoming diplomatic challenge. Elias frowned. That sounds unfriendly. It's formal, the Queen said, which makes it worse. The symbol expanded into a projection. An alien figure appeared, tall and sharp-edged, with metallic skin and glowing eyes. Elias recognized the species from his briefings. The Trellick Combine. Human Elias Ward, figure said, voice cold and precise. We acknowledge the Vulperin Declaration. We challenge the validity of your recognized authority. Leah sat up straighter. On what grounds? On the grounds that humans are unstable, the Trellick replied. Your species has a documented history of internal conflict, rapid militarization, and unpredictable emotional response. Elias kept his face neutral. Those records are incomplete. All records are incomplete, the alien said. That is why we test. The Queen's ears flicked sharply. State your intention. We invoke the measure of response, the Trellick said. A lawful pressure assessment. Elias turned to the queen. What does that mean? She answered honestly. They will provoke you. The projection shifted. Images appeared of trade routes, border systems, and shared stations near human-controlled space. They will create tension, the queen continued. Not violent. Not illegal. Just enough to see how you react. Elias exhaled slowly. They want to see if I push back. They want to see if you break, she corrected. The Trellick figure waited, unblinking. Elias looked at the projection. What happens if I refuse? Refusal is a reaction, the alien said. We will record it. Elias nodded. Then proceed. The projection vanished. Silence filled the room again. You realize, the queen said carefully, that this will affect your species. I know, Elias said. That's why I won't respond alone. He activated his communicator and sent a single message to Earth. Not a demand. Not a warning. Just information. Something has happened. I will remain calm. Do not escalate. On Terra, analysts stared at the message in disbelief. That was it. No instructions. No panic. No attempt to control the situation. Some of them felt uneasy. Others felt proud. Hours passed. Reports came in from across the Vulperant system. Trade ships delayed. Inspection requirements increased. Bureaucratic pressure built slowly and carefully. Nothing dramatic. Nothing illegal. The Trellick Combine was patient. Elias observed it all and did nothing. He did not protest. He did not threaten. He did not request favors through his new status. He simply acknowledged every report and forwarded it, calmly to the proper channels. The queen watched closely. This is not how most species react, she said quietly. How do they react? Elias asked. They push back, she replied. Or they try to show strength. Or they demand exceptions, and that fails. He asked. Yes, she said. Every time? Another alert appeared. This one from a different source, the Kesh Union. Then another, the Rollith Syndicate. They all asked different questions. But the goal was the same. They wanted to see the human bend, flare, grab power. Elias did none of it. He remained exactly what he had been before the ceremony, a diplomat days past. The pressure did not break him. It did not even slow him. The queen began receiving reports of something unexpected. The tests were backfiring. Trade partners noticed that human shipping remained stable despite delays. Crews stayed calm. No threats were issued. No fleets moved. Instead, humans quietly rerouted resources, adjusted schedules, and absorbed losses without complaint. It unsettled people in one council chamber. An alien leader slammed a clawed hand on the table. Why aren't they reacting? Another answered softly, because they don't need to. Back in the Vulperant capital? An elder approached the queen. Your Majesty, he said. Ancient law states that continued restraint under pressure strengthens the bond. She nodded. I know. And if the pressure increases, then the recognition deepens. The elder hesitated. Then perhaps we should intervene. The queen shook her head. No, this is not ours to control. That night, Elias stood on a balcony, looking out at the stars. He felt small beneath them, but steady. He had grown up on a world where storms came without warning, where systems failed, where survival meant adaptation, not dominance. A presence joined him. You are changing how they see you, the queen said. I'm not trying to, Elias replied. That is what frightens them, she said. Another message arrived. This time, it was public. The Trellick Combine announced a withdrawal of their challenge. They cited insufficient data across the galaxy. Reactions spread quickly. They tried to provoke a human, and the human did not move. That absence of reaction sent ripples deeper than any show of force ever. Cadet Elias read the announcement and felt no triumph. Only a quiet understanding. This was not about him. It never. It was about what humans represented? When stripped of weapons and titles, restraint under, pressure control without dominance, strength. that did not need to announce itself. The queen looked at him with something new in her eyes. Respect. Yes, but also recognition. Far away, councils revised old assumptions. Military planners adjusted probability models. Ancient systems updated classifications they had not touched in millennia. Humanity's label changed. Not conqueror, not threat, not ally. Something more difficult, too. To find something that endured. And, as the galaxy struggled to understand that idea, Elias remained where he was, steady and unremarkable, which in that moment made him the most dangerous kind of influence there was. The crisis began quietly. Which made it more dangerous. Elias learned about it the same way. He learned about everything else now, not through alarms or shouting, but through carefully worded reports that tried very hard not to sound afraid. He sat in a meeting chamber with walls of soft light as Vulperin advisors projected data into the air. A trade corridor near the outer edge of the Dominion had stalled. At first, it looked like another test. Delays, inspections, paperwork loops that led nowhere. But then came the details that did not fit. Civilian ships were trapped between systems. Supply vessels carrying food and medical equipment were unable to pass. Local stations reported rising tension among crews of mixed species. Still no weapons. Still no open threats. Just pressure. Elias leaned forward, reading the data slowly. Who controls the choke point? The Kesh Union, an advisor replied. They are acting within legal boundaries. Barely. Queen Shireen stood nearby, arms folded, watching Elias instead of the display. They are exploiting gaps in overlapping treaties, she said. If challenged directly, they will retreat and claim misunderstanding. And if not challenged, Elias asked, the situation will worsen, she said. Hunger creates anger. Anger creates excuses, Elias nodded. They're waiting for someone to lose patience. Yes, the queen agreed. Preferably you. Elias exhaled slowly. The pattern was becoming clear. The galaxy was testing not his strength, but his limits. How long could restraint hold before it became weakness? How many civilians are affected? He asked. Thousands already, an advisor said. More by the hour. Elias closed his eyes briefly. This was the line. Not pride. Not authority. This lives, he opened his eyes. I want a channel to the Kesh Union. The room went still, directly. An elder asked. Yes, Elias said. Public, recorded. The queen studied him. They will expect a demand. Won't get one, he replied. The channel opened moments later. The image of a Kesh Union representative appeared, scaled skin, narrow eyes, posture stiff with control. He smiled politely. Human Elias Ward, the Kesh said. To what do we owe? Civilians are stuck in your corridor, Elias said calmly. They will run out of supplies in 3 cycles. The smile did not fade. Regrettable. Our inspectors are thorough. You know they are not the issue, Elias replied. The Kesh tilted his head slightly. Do you accuse us of wrongdoing? No, Elias said. I acknowledge your right to inspect, the representative blinked. That was not the answer he expected. Then this conversation is unnecessary, the Kesh said. It is, Elias agreed. But I'm having it anyway? The queen's ears twitched with interest. Elias continued, his voice steady. You are applying pressure to provoke reaction. I understand the strategy. Humans used it before we reached the stars. The Kesh leaned back. And did it work? Sometimes, Elias said, until people realized pressure cuts both ways. The Kesh's smile thinned. Is that a threat? No, Elias said. It's an observation. Silence stretched between them. You want us to open the corridor? The Kesh said at last. I want the civilians to pass, Elias corrected. You can continue inspecting afterward. That would undermine our leverage, the Kesh replied. Yes, Elias said. It would. The Kesh studied him carefully now. You offer nothing in return. I offer stability, Elias said. And restraint, the Kesh laughed softly. You offer what you are already doing. Yes, Elias said. Because it's working. As Kesh's eyes narrowed. Is this how you plan to use your so-called royal authority? I'm not using it, Elias replied. I'm reminding you why it exists. He paused, then added, if the civilians suffer, systems older than both our governments will respond. Not violently, automatically. The Kesh representative stiffened. Are you certain? I didn't activate them, Elias said. You did? By creating this situation, Queen glanced at the advisors. They understood now. Ancient laws were designed to prevent collapse, not win arguments. If enough harm occurred under deliberate pressure, intervention protocols would trigger without mercy or negotiation. The Kesh looked away briefly, consulting something off-screen. When he returned, his expression was controlled but tight. The corridor will open for humanitarian traffic only, he said. Thank you, Elias replied. The channel closed. The room exhaled. One advisor stared at Elias. You threaten nothing. I know, Elias said. You promised nothing. I know. Yet they backed down, the advisor said. Elias leaned back. Because they weren't fighting me? The Queen stepped forward. They were fighting consequences. News of the corridor reopening spread quickly. Ships moved again. Supplies reached stations just in time. Across the region, tension eased before it could ignite. But the impact did not stop there. Other species noticed something important. The human did not win by force. He did not win by command. He won by refusing to let the situation become about him. In distant councils, leaders reviewed the recordings. Analysts slowed them down, replaying every word. They searched for hidden threats, coded dominance, subtle manipulation. They found none. That unsettled them more than aggression ever could. On Terra, the reports arrived with growing disbelief. Humanity had prepared for backlash, for sanctions, even for isolation. Instead, something else was happening. Requests came in. Quiet ones. Advisors asking how humans handled pressure. Civil authorities asking about disaster management without escalation. Even military planners asked questions, not about weapons, but about control. Back on the Volperin world, Elias stood again on the balcony. The stars felt closer now, not because he mattered more, but because distance felt smaller. You acted, the Queen said, joining him. I had to, Elias replied. People were going to get hurt. You did not invoke your status, she said. I don't want it, Elias said. She nodded. That is why it grows. He frowned. That's not comforting. It is not meant to be, she replied gently. An elder approached them. Your Majesty, updated analysis confirms the bond has stabilized several overlapping treaties. Conflicts have de-escalated in 3 regions. Elias looked at the Queen. By accident. Yes, she said. The most dangerous kind? The elder hesitated. There is another development. Several ancient systems have reclassified humans as neutral anchors. Elias raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. It means the Queen said that in times of pressure, systems will look to humanity's response as a baseline. Elias was quiet for a long moment. So if humans lose control, he said slowly, the galaxy follows. Yes, she answered. He looked back at the stars. Then we won't. The Queen watched him with something like awe. That night, as the crisis faded, the galaxy adjusted. Not because it was forced to, but because it had seen something rare. Power that solved problems without feeding itself. Authority that existed without appetite. And a human who did not seek a crown, but still carried its weight. The tests were not over. But for the first time, many realized they were no longer testing Elias Ward. They were testing themselves. And that realization would lead directly to the final reckoning still to come. The galaxy did not end with fire or conquest. It changed with quiet decisions made in calm rooms. Elias Ward learned this as the weeks passed after the corridor crisis. There were no celebrations, no grand declarations. Instead, there was silence again. But this time it was different. It was not the silence of planning or fear. It was the silence of systems adjusting themselves. Requests still arrived, but they were no longer challenges. They were questions. How would humanity respond to this kind of pressure? What would a human choose when there was no perfect answer? How much force was too much? Elias did not answer most of them directly. He redirected them to existing laws, shared past human experiences, and emphasized cooperation over control. He never claimed authority. He never issued commands. He simply participated, and that somehow was enough. One morning, Elias received a message from Earth, not from a council or a government, but from an old colleague who had once trained him in crisis mediation. "You're doing exactly what you always did," the message said, "just on a larger stage." Elias smiled faintly and closed the message. He had never wanted a larger stage. In the Volperan capital, the Queen watched the same changes with careful attention. Reports confirmed what she already felt. Conflict probability across several regions had dropped. Negotiations that had been frozen for decades were restarting. Even rival powers began adjusting their language, avoiding threats and ultimatums. Not because they feared punishment, because punishment no longer worked the way it used to. Ancient systems, long ignored, were waking fully now. They did not favor Volperan interests or human goals. They favored balance. When pressure rose too high, they nudged systems toward stability. When dominance grew unchecked, they slowed it, and humanity had become their reference point. This troubled many leaders. In one distant council chamber, an alien ruler leaned forward and spoke a question no one wanted to voice. What happens if humans fail? The room had no answer. Back on the Volperan world, the final step came without warning. Elias was summoned to the old chamber beneath the palace, a place sealed for centuries. The walls were carved from raw stone, untouched by modern design. Symbols glowed softly, responding to his presence. The Queen stood at the center. "This is where the law completes itself," she said. Elias looked around. "I didn't agree to anything else." She nodded. "You won't be asked to." The stone floor shimmered. A projection formed not of power but of choice. A single question appeared, translated cleanly into his language. "Will you accept recognition without possession?" Elias frowned. "What happens if I say no?" "The systems will withdraw," the Queen said. "Slowly, peacefully. And if I say yes, nothing will change," she replied. "Except how the galaxy listens." Elias laughed softly. "That sounds like everything." The Queen's expression was calm, but her eyes were serious. "You were chosen because you do not want this. That condition remains." Elias thought of Earth, of storms and cities and arguments that never ended, of humans failing, learning, failing again, of how much damage they had done and how hard they tried to fix it afterward. He thought of the trapped civilians, of pressure that broke people quietly, of power that solved nothing. He answered, "Yes." The light faded. The chamber returned to stone and silence. No surge of energy. No visible change. Elias blinked. "That's it?" The Queen smiled. "Yes." Within minutes, alerts spread across the galaxy. Not alarms. Confirmations. Human recognition status. Stabilized. Role. Neutral anchor. Function. Passive reference. The wording confused many. It terrified others because it meant the galaxy had accepted something irreversible. Humanity was not in charge, but they were no longer optional. Elias returned to his quarters and packed his few belongings. He had requested permission to leave the Volperan world weeks ago. Now, the request was granted instantly. The Queen met him at the departure platform. "You are returning home," she said. "Yes," Elias replied. "I should never have stayed this long." "You were never meant to stay," she said. "Just to pass through." He paused before boarding. "What happens now?" The Queen looked up at the stars. "Now the galaxy learns restraint. And if it doesn't," Elias asked. She met his gaze. "Then it will learn why restraint matters." Elias nodded once and boarded the ship. As it lifted off, no escort followed. No honor guard. No symbols of power. Just a quiet departure. On Terra, the landing was unremarkable. No crowds waited. No speeches were planned. Elias passed through security like any other returning envoy. But behind the scenes, everything had changed. Trade negotiations became calmer. Military exercises grew more measured. Diplomatic language softened across dozens of species. Not because humans demanded it. Because escalation felt unnecessary. In classrooms and briefing rooms, a new concept appeared in galactic studies. Human response model. It did not describe weapons or fleets. It described patience. Time passed. The Fox Queen continued to rule, her dominion more stable than it had been in generations. She never performed the ancient gesture again. The law did not need repetition. Other species quietly updated their ceremonial rules. Do not perform traditional dominance tests on humans. Consult legal counsel before physical customs. Unexpected acceptance may occur. Among civilians, stories spread. Some were exaggerated. Some were humorous. A human diplomat. A fox queen. A gesture misunderstood. But beneath the humor was something real. The galaxy had met a species that could carry weight without adding pressure. Elias returned to ordinary work. He mediated disputes. He negotiated agreements. He drank bad station coffee and filled out endless reports. He never claimed royal protection, though it followed him quietly. Once, during a difficult negotiation, an alien delegate leaned forward and asked him directly, "What gives humans the right to influence us this way?" Elias answered honestly, "Nothing," he said. "That's the point." The delegate sat back, unsettled. Years later, historians would debate the moment everything shifted. Some pointed to treaties, others to ancient systems, a few to a single ceremony in a Volperin hall, but those who looked closely agreed on one thing. It was not the gesture. It was the lack of reaction. Humanity did not conquer the stars. They did not claim thrones or rewrite laws by force. They simply showed the galaxy what control looked like when it was not hungry. And once the galaxy saw that, it could never unsee it. Far above, stars burned on, indifferent as always. But the civilizations beneath them had changed course. Not because they were told to, but because at last they had learned how.